You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph, and today I'm going to be previewing 49ers offense versus the Rams defense. It's the last preview before Monday Night Football, and then I'm going to just enjoy my weekend. I hope you guys too. But before we get started with the preview, let's go over some 49ers news. There's some injury news to take care of today before we get into anything else. So the good news, I'm going to start off with the good news. The good news is that Daniel Brunskill he returned to practice this week. And so now the question becomes, well, could we expect him to start? Is he really going to play in this game? And if so, where? The 49ers were interested in having him at center this year, but last season he played at right guard. So interesting to see where Brunskill fits in this offensive line if they do plan to start him at all. That'll be interesting to see. But other news from today, some practice news today being Friday, by the way. Ross Dwelly, he was suited up and he was working with the trainer during practice, so that would certainly seem to indicate that he might be good to go. He's dealing with a rib injury. Javon Kinlaw, he's not practicing for the second straight day, dealing with a knee injury. We really haven't gotten a lot of information on that one, but somewhat concerning given the fact that he's dealt with knee injuries in the past, that has impacted, his ability to stay on the field. So hopefully he can practice tomorrow. Since the 49ers play on Monday, the 49ers are going to be able to practice tomorrow. And then so that will really give us a better idea of who may be sitting out for this game. Javon Kinlaw has another shot tomorrow to practice before game day. Eric Armstead, he's still not practicing as well with his foot injury, but he's been doing some work on the side. So I know Kyle Shanahan, I think, said that he was somewhat hopeful for Armstead to play this week, but I don't know. It's really hard to get a feel for it. Again, we'll just have to wait for Saturday's practice to see what happens with Armstead. Obviously, Kinlaw and Armstead, very big pieces to the 49ers defensive line, and so if those guys are out, it's going to be some tough sledding out there against this Rams offense. And another guy on the 49ers offense who isn't practicing is Danny Gray. He hasn't practiced at all this week. He's dealing with a hip injury. And the usual suspects of Trent Williams, Ty Davis-Price, Azeez Al-Shaair, Tyler Kroft remain out, as we know that they will be for a few weeks with their injuries. Before I get into this preview, just really quickly, make sure that you guys like this video if you like what I'm doing here, and make sure you subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content. I do offense and defense previews every week. And if you're an audio listener, be sure to leave 49 Carats Podcast a rating. I appreciate you guys. All right, let's get into this preview here. What's good, Callie? Thank you for joining today. We got a good preview on deck. 49ers offense. I know after last week, we're not so excited about the offense right now, but, I think better days are ahead. My faith in them hasn't wavered, but it's not going to be an easy matchup by any means. So let's get into it. I just wanted to start off with this stat. So over the last 2 weeks, the Rams defense have held their opposing offenses to just 9 for 28 on third downs. And that's a 32.1 conversion rate, which would be good for 8th in the NFL this season. If you consider how bad the 49ers were on third down last week, and you look at that, stat from the Rams defense on how they're limiting opposing offenses on third down, it's a little concerning. You know right off the bat, the 49ers can't have a similar performance to what they had last week if they have any hopes of winning this game. And so that obviously is a big key for them in this one, being able to convert on third downs, and not just being able to convert on third downs. How about don't even get to third down? The third and long situations are not ideal. And maybe maybe be aggressive on first and second downs a little bit more than they have been. But let's start off looking at the 49ers tight ends. I mean, we got George Kittle back in the fold as of last week. And I know there's a lot of talk on the timeline of, George Kittle's role, and it's been a point of frustration for quite some time now. The fact that he blocks a lot, he's not getting the ball quite as often as he should, definitely not as much as he was back in 2018 when he blew up. So the question I have is like, should we expect or accept the role that George Kittle has on this team? At this point, I am somewhat expecting because last week, George Kittle blocked on 41% of his snaps. And as a receiver, he was 4 of 4 for 28 yards. I think it's important also to consider the fact that Trent Williams, since he's going to be out this week, the 49ers do actually need his help in blocking. And so, as much as I, love him as a receiving weapon, I mean, he definitely is. I also like him as a blocker. And I think that the 49ers are going to need him to shore up that left side of the line in this one. But I think it's also important to look at how George Kittle is going to be matching up against the Rams linebackers. So they now have Bobby Wagner. If you guys recall, Bobby Wagner, former Seahawks, they signed him this offseason. He's still pretty good. He has a 69.5 PFF coverage grade on the season and overall 85.6 defense grade. And he hasn't been targeted much through 3 weeks, honestly. He's been targeted 4 times. He's allowed 4 receptions, but just for a total of 20 yards, 18 of which came in week 1. So you think about that. Week 1 heavily skewed the Rams numbers, both for the defense and the offense. But hey, the way I look at it is this 49ers team is probably closer to talent-wise to what the Bills have than what the Cardinals and the Panthers have, right? I think it was Panthers they played in week 2. But yeah, so I think this is going to be a challenge for the Rams just as much as it will be for the 49ers as well. The other linebacker that the Rams have is Ernest Jones. He has a 61.1 coverage grade, so not as good as his counterpart, but he's been targeted a whole lot more. 15 times through 3 weeks is how much he's been targeted. 8 times last week versus the Cardinals alone. The Cardinals, by the way, last week, they threw it a shit ton. So that kind of, I think, helped inflate the target numbers for some of these defensive players. But yeah, 8 times he was targeted last week. And on the season, he's allowing an average of 6.3 yards per reception, which is pretty decent. I mean, if I'm the 49ers, I like that number. Definitely could get some good chunk yardage. And, if I'm George Kittle, I would expect the Rams will want to match up Wagner on Kittle as much as possible, but Kyle Shanahan, I think, will also try to get Kittle on some mismatches. So hopefully we see Jones on Kittle and we see Jimmy Garoppolo maximize on those matchup opportunities and get the ball to Kittle when those opportunities present themselves. So that's the tight end. I mean, to kind of give an overall view of that, Bobby Wagner, don't throw it his way, but Ernest Jones, he could be had. So, if you want to match up George Kittle, match up on Ernest Jones. And Jimmy Garoppolo capitalize on those opportunities. But as far as the run game goes, the good news about the run game, and maybe I could have included this in the news portion of the episode, but former 49ers running back coach Bobby Turner, he's rejoining the team as of this week. You may recall he had surgery in the offseason, and he's been with the team for I feel like he's been with the team for as long as I've been a fan of the team, going back to like Frank Gore days. So you may recall he had his surgery in the offseason. And when you're 73 years old, you need a lot of rest when you have surgery, right? So he took some time off away from the team, hasn't been around the team at all, but he's rejoining them this week. And that is great news for this 49ers offense because it means that Bobby Turner can focus on, what he does best, which is coaching the running backs, and Anthony Lynn could be more of a consultant of sorts and help Kyle Shanahan, prep the run game and the offense for the week. So definitely a huge boost for the offense. And definitely happy to have him back. Callie says, this is a great comment. I think we're becoming too predictable on first downs. Shake it up, Kyle. I absolutely agree. And it's perfect you say this while we're talking about the run game, because I feel like it's very common for Kyle to just run it on first and second downs. And a lot of the time he does have success, but I mean, I think we saw last week that wasn't very successful for much of the game, and it got the 49ers in a lot of third and distance situations, and those are the situations that you don't want to be in when the opposing defense knows that you're going to throw, especially when you're dealing with a quarterback like Jimmy Garoppolo, who at this point, a lot of defenses know his tendencies, know his strengths and his weaknesses. So they're going to defend him a certain way, especially when they know it's a obvious passing down situation. So yeah, I'm with you on that, Callie. What's going on, 49er media? The 49ers, I think, need to be more aggressive. And it's so strange because historically, I feel like they are aggressive against the Rams. And so there's this kind of, I don't know, Kyle Shanahan really likes to show off against, his proteges and Sean McVay. Love the Kyle Shanahan hat. Yeah, it's so funny. Literally every time I wear this in a podcast, someone's like, I love your hat. It's like, it's on Fanatics, I think. You guys could get it too. It used to be like the first year he started wearing it, it was like such a prized possession. Like you couldn't find it anywhere. And then now I think it's just kind of a regular hat to me now. But it's so funny because like people still love it. I love this hat too. The Shanahan is goated, confirmed. Going back to the run game, Jeff Wilson Jr. last week, 12 carries, 75 yards, no touchdowns, and he had the one fumble, which pretty much sealed the fate of the 49ers in that one late in the game. So, I mean, he wasn't terrible. Like 12 carries for 75 yards isn't like the worst stat, but it's also not as efficient as you are used to the 49ers offense and the running game being, right? So, and give credit to the Broncos defense. I mean, they are a really solid defense, and I wasn't expecting that one to be an easy matchup. But at the same time, going into that game, the 49ers had the fourth highest rushing yards of the season, and the Broncos had the fifth most yards allowed, I think. So I really thought it was going to be a better game for the for the run game, and it just wasn't. I also was expecting Jordan Mason would have a bigger role in the game because the previous week we saw Jeff Wilson Jr. and we saw Ty Davis Price get some carries, and I was like, okay, well, Ty Davis Price is gone, then that must mean Jordan Mason has a shot and he's going to take over the Ty Davis Price role. No, that didn't happen. Jordan Mason only had 2 snaps, 1 carry, and that 1 carry went for 7 yards. If someone in particular, an undrafted free agent rookie, and he's playing in this game against the Broncos defense, and on his first carry of the regular season, he gets 7 yards, I'm going to run him again. I don't know why they only gave him 1 carry, like just considering just how much juice they were lacking in that game. I would have thrown in Jordan Mason and just like I would have seen what he had. And I hope that we see it in this game against the Rams, but I'm kind of worried that we won't. Tevin Coleman, who is on the practice squad right now, he's up there in age. Like he's a vet, he's one of those guys Kyle Shanahan just cannot quit. And granted, it's because there are injuries to the running back group, but he's on the practice squad right now. And Adam Schefter has hinted more than once now. I think he's hinted it like 2 times that Tevin Coleman's probably going to be elevated to the active roster for this game. And not just that, but he said Coleman is someone to keep an eye on. So I'm like, well, shit. Are the 49ers really going to give Tevin Coleman more snaps than Jordan Mason in this game? I don't know. I'm a little worried about that, and I don't know if I'd be so pleased. I don't know if Coleman has any juice left, like, quite honestly. And Marlon Mack, he also didn't get any snaps last week. That one I'm not as angry about. But yes, the running game needs to be good for this offense to work. And if they're not getting chunk yardage, it's very hard for anything else to go right. So it's definitely a little worrisome, the performance we saw last week from them. And I mean, it just had a trickle down effect. I think when you put the ball in Jimmy Garoppolo's hands, more often than not, you're going to get the, scenarios we saw last week. But as the 49ers run game, I mean, I really hope that, they're better this week, but it's going to be tough sledding once again, not just because I think the Rams are going to key in on the 49ers run game, but also because of the state of the offensive line. I mean, obviously, no Trent Williams in this game. Colton McKivitz is in line to start. The good news, the 49ers are 2-0 with McKivitz at left tackle, but I mean, the bad news is that the Rams defensive line is, freaking scary because it has to go up again, or because they have Aaron Donald. And the good thing is they don't have Von Miller anymore, who obviously made a huge impact in the game in week 18 and also in the NFC Conference Championship game. He was just wrecking the line. So definitely positive that he's not going to be out there, because really the biggest worry for the offensive line will be Aaron Donald. But let's talk about Colton McKivitz, shifting back to, left tackle talk. He's going to be going up against Justin Holland. Okay, going back to last week, McKivitz allowed 1 pressure and 1 hurry, but that was just on 10 pass blocking snaps. That's not good. That's not good. I hope it's just because, when you don't expect to play in a game and you just kind of get thrown in there, I gotta imagine it's not easy to just be perfect right off the bat. So I'm gonna just chalk it up as it being that, and that's why he struggled. Because he did play, like I said, last season at left tackle, and actually in week 18 versus the Rams when Trent Williams didn't play. So in last season's week 18, McKivitz allowed 4 pressures, 2 hurries, and 2 sacks on 37 pass blocking snaps. That to me also doesn't sound too great. I mean, that's 4 pressures. That's a lot to be giving up. Obviously he's not Trent Williams, but I would hope that he puts together, a better game than that. Mcglinchey, he's been hyping McKivitz up, and he says he's seen improvements in him from last season. And man, we just really need that to be true, because we need good offensive line play for, again, the run game, and for Jimmy to have time to throw. I mean, McKivitz is going to be on Jimmy's blind side, so just even more important to be stellar at that position, which we're so used to having, such a stable force in Trent Williams. And now with McKivitz, he really just needs to put together a solid performance. Justin Holland, who he is going to be lining up against, he has 3 total pressures, 1 sack, 2 hurries, and 8 tackles, and 4 stops through 3 weeks. So it's not like Hollins hasn't been like a world wrecker, okay? Like 3 pressures in 3 weeks, like, okay, I feel like that could be manageable for McKivitz, right? So luckily he's not going up against Von Miller. So we can feel good about that. So I feel like Justin Hollins, it's not the worst matchup in the world for McKivitz, and this is an opportunity for him to, okay, if you are better this season, show us. And I think it could be one of those like confidence boosting type of games for him. Let's look at the other side here. So Aaron Banks, And I like this matchup this week for Aaron Banks, who has been one of the more consistent players on the 49ers offensive line. He still hasn't allowed any sacks through 3 weeks, and he's allowed just 4 pressures in these 3 games. Last week, just 1 pressure, 1 hurry allowed. He has a 77 overall PFF offense grade, and he's going to be going up against Ashawn Robinson on the Rams. And Robinson, he's not been big on pass rush contributions really for the Rams defensive line. He doesn't have any pressures this season. No sacks, no hurries, nothing. So that's a good sign for Aaron Banks. The only thing is Ashawn Robinson has 11 tackles and 8 stops. And so the 8 stops is pretty impressive. So on running plays in particular, Banks is going to need to keep him in check. But otherwise, in pass protection, I feel good about this matchup for Aaron Banks. And I would expect that he has another, solid performance in this one. Now let's look at center. So Jake Brendel, he's going to be matched up against Greg Gaines for much of this game. And from what I can gather on Greg Gaines, he's a pretty poor tackler, all things considered. I mean, 30% missed tackle rate this season, which is pretty high. I mean, if you think about, missed tackles aren't very common, and they shouldn't be, but 30%, that's high enough that I'm like, okay, yeah, he's probably not that good of a tackler. But through 3 games, he's generated 3 pressures and 3 hurries. Jake Brendel, I think he's been holding up nicely, and PFF has him with just 2 pressures and 2 hurries allowed on the season, and both of those came in week 1. And the last 2 weeks, though, have been especially great for Brendel in pass blocking, and so that's a good sign for the 49ers. And Greg Gaines, the Rams, isn't going to be the only guy that Brendel is going to be seeing plenty of, though. I'm not afraid of this matchup for Jake Brendel going up against Greg Gaines. I'm more scared of the next guy I'm about to talk about, who I imagine Brendel will have to, block a few times in this one. Aaron Donald. We all know who he is. I wish he would have retired this offseason. Things would have been a lot simpler. But Aaron Donald, through 3 weeks, he has 14 total pressures, 2 sacks, a quarterback hit, and 11 hurries. He also has 7 tackles and 5 stops. PFF has him 90.2 overall grade. But let's look at Aaron Donald last season against the Niners. In week 10, he had just 1 pressure, his lowest of the season. So great performance there by Brunskill. In week 18 versus the Niners last season, he had 2 pressures, one of his lowest of the season. But in the conference championship game, he had 4 pressures, 2 hurries, and 2 quarterback hits. The biggest takeaway for me from looking at Aaron Donald's stats from, the first 3 games of this season is that, not this season, but if you look at the last 3 games that we played Aaron Donald, week 10, week 18, conference championship game, 0 sacks. He didn't have any sacks against the 49ers last season. So that is probably the biggest takeaway, and, speaks to how good Daniel Brunskill was against him last season, where, he went up against him most of the time. So now in 49er media says going to need AD's dad to play. And by AD's dad, he's talking about none other than Daniel Brunskill. And this is where I'm at, okay? Because I'm also wondering what happens with Daniel Brunskill. I mean, it's like you kind of have to play him, right? Like, he's always been so good against Donald that, I mean, if he starts practicing this week, let's put him out there. But the big question that I have is Spencer Burford. I mean, he's been the rookie. He's been the one starting at right guard this whole time. And, now that they have the Donald neutralizer, aka Daniel Brunskill, do they let Brunskill start at right guard and just bench Spencer Burford? One case that I might make against starting Brunskill, you guys might not like this, but one case I might make is that Brunskill, he hasn't practiced for over a month before he returned to practice just this week. So is he in game shape? I think that's a fair question. Like, is he ready to go out there and play? Because you better be in game shape if you plan to stop Aaron Donald. You know, all the other times I wasn't a concern, but right now he hasn't played for like a month, so that's a little concerning for me. And while Spencer Burford, he did struggle last week, it was his worst game by far, which is not saying much because there's only been 3 games, right? But last week he allowed 3 pressures, 2 hurries, and a quarterback hit versus the Broncos. And he also had 2 penalties. So I feel like that performance, in the 49ers mind, very, recency bias, that's the last thing in their head when thinking about Spencer Burford. I feel like the 49ers may just consider just starting Daniel Brunskill. Is there a reason to be concerned about Spencer Burford? I don't know. They might feel like there is, and they might consider wanting to put Brunskill back at his natural position. But here's what I think we see happen. Well, okay, I shouldn't say here's what I think will happen. If it were me, this is what I would do, and I wouldn't be surprised if the 49ers did it, but I don't know. I think they let Spencer Burford start the game, and I think if he does struggle at all against Aaron Donald, you pivot immediately to Daniel Brunskill. So even if Brunskill is not like game ready, or you have concerns that he's not like I don't know, he's not ready to start playing right off the bat. I think if Burford struggles, like, you kind of just have to go for it because you know how good Brunskill has been historically against Aaron Donald. So yeah, that's what I think might happen. I don't know though. It'll be interesting to see for sure what the team decides to do with Brunskill this week or next, because I feel like it's not a guarantee that Brunskill is even active for this game. But we'll see. We'll see. All right, so that's the Aaron Donald matchup. Obviously, always very scary, but it could turn out okay. Okay, it could. So let's talk about Mike Mcglinchey. Because Mike Mcglinchey, he didn't have his best game last week. He gave up 3 pressures and 3 hurries after having strong weeks 1 and week 2. Mcglinchey didn't play versus the Rams at all last season because he suffered his injury in week 9. The 49ers didn't play the Rams until week 10 and then on. So we didn't get a chance to see Mike Mcglinchey against Leonard Floyd last season. You guys remember it was Tom Compton that played right tackle from then on out after Mcglinchey's injury. Compton, by the way, no longer with the team. So Mcglinchey going up against Leonard Floyd. However, he did play in those games. He was hot and cold, or cold and hot, depending how you want to look at it. In week 10 against the Niners, Leonard Floyd had 2 pressures and 2 hurries. That's whatever. I mean, that's okay. It's all right. Week 18 versus the Niners, he had just 1 pressure and 1 hurry. And then in the conference championship, though, he had 5 pressures and 5 hurries. So he really turned it up for that game, as most of the Rams did. But like I said, hot and cold, or cold and hot. Through 3 games this season, Floyd has 8 total pressures, 5 hurries, and 3 quarterback hits. So I'm not really sure what to expect with this matchup against Lloyd and Mcglinchey, but I lean on this being a bit of a challenge for Mcglinchey. And I also called out last week how I thought it was going to be a challenge, and it did end up being one for him. So we might see a similar performance uh, this week from Mcglinchey as well, and especially if Aaron Donald is able to get like penetration, is able to break up the protection. Aaron Donald is like a offensive line wrecker, so if he has success in that, it could trickle down to the other guys on the line as well. It just makes it all the much harder for the other guys, to block their assignments. So I don't know what to expect, but I think this is going to be a tough one for Mcglinchey. Which is a concern, right? Because we're just talking about McKivitz, possibly. I don't know what to expect from McKivitz too. I think it's a favorable matchup for McKivitz, but I honestly don't know. So I have question marks about both tackle positions in this game, and that's not a good thing. 49er Media has a question. Are you concerned about the interior of the defensive line with Kinlaw now banged up? Yes and no. I'm more concerned about the long term because we don't know the extent of Kinlaw's injury right now. I feel like we don't have a lot of information about it. All we know is that it's a knee. I don't think we even know what knee it's on. We know that Kinlaw has had knee injuries in the past, and so if he's dealing with something on that same knee, I would be concerned about the long-term outlook of the season and the interior of the defensive line. But in this game, definitely also concerning, but the 49ers defensive line is so deep that I think they'll be able to manage. But it is definitely concerning, especially with Eric Armstead possibly out, again too. I don't know if even Eric Armstead is going to play. So there definitely are some concerns there, but I think I always just lean on the fact that the 49ers have so much depth and quality depth that they could remain effective even with, Eric Armstead being out and, now possibly even with Kinlaw being out. So my concerns are more so long-term than, short-term. All right, let's talk about the fun part. Jimmy Garoppolo. I would expect, this is what I'm going to say, I would expect that the Rams are going to try to stop the run game because they know, I feel like all the defenses know, if you just stop the run game and you force Jimmy Garoppolo to throw, good things are going to happen for you, the defense, right? Similar to the conference championship, similar to what we saw last week. And so it's going to be up to Jimmy to actually execute better and maximize his opportunities when they present themselves. And by that, I'm kind of referring to all those screenshots we saw of Deebo Samuel wide open. And, I think even Ayuk was open for some plays last week as well that, Jimmy Garoppolo either didn't see or just didn't throw it. He has to hit those. All right. Last week versus the Broncos, also a good defense. He had 211 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And he had a 2.4 second average time to throw. Jimmy usually gets the ball out pretty quick. It's more the decision making that's an issue. But let's look at how Garoppolo fared last season versus the Rams. So in week 10, he was extremely efficient. He only threw the ball 19 times and had a 78.8 completion percentage. Good for 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. In that week 10 game, his average time to throw was 2.08, which was his fastest of the season. So I don't know if that was by design. I would imagine it was because, when you face Aaron Donald, you want to get the ball out quickly. So I think it was by design. And like I said, I think it's something the 49ers are going to want to do again. In week 18, Garoppolo had 316 yards and a touchdown, but 2 interceptions. So he didn't take care of the football, but the 49ers still found a way to win, thankfully. Thank you, Debo. And then the conference championship, Jimmy had a 53.5 completion percentage, 232 yards for 2 touchdowns and an interception. Interesting enough, his time to throw in that game was 2.75, which is rather long for him. And he wasn't sacked in that game in the conference championship. So what Jimmy do we get this week is like the big question on everyone's minds. It's like every week you never know. You literally never know. And that's the fear always, right? Like you just don't know which Jimmy you're going to get. I do think that he'll have a better game this week than last week. I think the 49ers are going to look to, get the ball out quickly to neutralize the Rams pass rush, especially with no Trent Williams. The 49ers will want to get the ball out of Garoppolo's hands, right? Like, I think that's definitely important. And they'll also need to have some success in the run game in order to complement the the passing game, or it'll just be way too easy for the Rams defense if the 49ers offense is forced to be one-dimensional. So that's my concern, right? And that's why I'm a little concerned with the run game as it stands, because what we saw last week can't happen again. We need more Jordan Mason out there. Someone who's going to the game should just bring a sign, have it right behind the 49ers bench, and just say, like, put in Jordan Mason. Like, maybe that'll get Kyle to listen to us. But yeah, I mean, the 49ers are going to have a balanced attack, and that's why they use Deebo Samuel so much in these games against the Rams, because they have to find that spark in the run game in order to get everything else to just kind of work, right? So speaking of Deebo Samuel, let's get into the 49ers receivers, because Deebo, he's had some really great games against the Rams. And so far, in comparison to last season through the first 3 weeks, Deebo is seeing a lot more carries and less involvement in the passing game. And by involvement, I just mean like he's getting the ball a little bit less as a receiver. And it's not all his fault, right? I mean, we saw him running routes last week where he was wide open. QB has to throw him the ball. But Deebo, like I said, has gashed the Rams in 3 games against them last season. In week 10, he had 5 targets, 5 receptions, 97 yards, and a receiving touchdown. He also had 5 carries for 26 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Beast. In week 18, he had 6 targets, 4 receptions for 95 yards, and he also had 8 carries for 45 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Again, beast. And then in the conference championship, he had 7 targets, 4 receptions, 72 yards, 1 receiving touchdown, and he also had 7 carries for 26 yards. Pay attention to that last stat, though. In the conference championship, 7 carries, 26 yards, in comparison to 8 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown, in comparison to 5 carries for 26 yards and a touchdown. Much less efficient in that conference championship game working as a wide back. And I keep getting the sense that teams know when Deebo is going to get a carry, and they seem way more prepared for it than last season. I don't know if you guys are kind of feeling that same vibe, but I would expect it to continue in this game, because we saw it in that conference championship. They were ready for the Deebo runs, and that's part of the reason why the offense, I think, struggled to get going in that second half, because they were leaning on Deebo to get that chunk yardage, and it just wasn't working because the Rams defense had just keyed in on it. They knew it was coming, and the 49ers offense, besides that, just couldn't get anything else to work. So, yeah, I would expect that the Rams are 100% prepared for Deebo as a wide back. So I hope I hope the 49ers get Debo going as a receiver in this one so they won't have to rely on him as a wide back as much, and just in case that fails, because you can't have another situation like the conference championship where you just keep trying to run Debo and you're not getting anything, and then before you know it, you're going 3 and out, and you're punting, and it's just like that endless cycle, right? So I would like to see Debo as a receiver more in this game because I expect that the Rams are expecting Debo as a wide back. So mix it up on them. But let's talk about Brandon Ayuk because he's had some good games against the Rams as well. He's had a total of 202 receiving yards in the 3 games played versus the Rams last season, most notably in Week 18 when he had 107 yards on 7 targets. So I would like to see more of that because if their primary focus on offense is going to be to stop Debo, then I need to see Ayuk step up. And not that he hasn't been. If you don't count the Week 1 monsoon game, Ayuk has 15 targets, 8 receptions for 102 yards and a touchdown in the last 2 weeks. And that's not bad. But if I'm the 49ers, I look to beat the Rams with a new primary weapon because, like I said, I think they're going to expect Debo. So I would look to get Ayuk going in this game. I mean, he has chemistry with Jimmy. Make it work. Juwan Jennings as well. I mean, Juwan Jennings just needs to continue doing what he does, which is his role is very specific and he does it very well. Third down chain mover. Very well at it. Very good at it. In Week 18 versus the Rams, he had a crazy 5 receptions that got a first down. I don't remember out of how many receptions that was, but 5 of them went for first down. I know that much. And that was his best game of the season last year, I think. And then Raymond Macleod, he has more of a featured role, somewhat more of a downfield guy. And with Danny Gray possibly out, maybe. I don't know yet, but it's kind of trending that way. Maybe we see Raymond Macleod, go deep. Maybe we see that at least once. Don't know. But it's always nice to have like a threat of big pass play, right? I know Jimmy doesn't often hit those, but just the threat of it, I think at least is just to show that you have the intention and you could do it. Just kind of throws things off a little bit. But the Rams corners, they're pretty solid. I mean, Jalen Ramsey is one of the best corners in the league. He had one of his best games last week against the Cardinals. He actually had 2 pressures and 2 hurries, and he had 6 tackles and 3 stops. When I say one of his best games of the season this season. So yeah, it was pretty good. But going back to last season, in Week 10, he didn't allow any completions on 2 targets. In Week 18, he was targeted 6 times and gave up 3 receptions for 88 yards. Not his finest moment. I think that's mostly credit to Debo too, that Week 18, those stats. And the conference championship, again, was targeted 2 times but didn't allow any receptions. So, like, Jalen Ramsey's good. I know we like to make fun of him sometimes, but he's, like I said, he's one of the best corners in the league. And then Troy Hill, the Rams' usual starting corner opposite of Ramsey, he's currently on IR. So last week, it was the Rams rookie, Darian Kendrick, who started in Troy Hill's place when the Rams played the Cardinals. It was his first start of the season. And get this. He was targeted 16 times. 16 times last week. That's nuts. And like I said, the Cardinals did throw the ball a hell of a lot last week, but holy shit, 16 times? That's crazy. He allowed 9 receptions for 102 yards, and he also had a pass breakup. But he's also coming off a concussion apparently, but he was a full participant today on Friday, so he is on track to play, I would think, based on that. And I think he probably has a better game this week just because I think, maybe the first game jitters are real, and Jimmy's not going to throw to him 16 times. So, but I also, just looking at how he did somewhat struggle last week, I think it is, an opportunity for some potential mismatches because Jalen Ramsey, what he brings. He's going to play tough. He wants to get an interception. If Jimmy continues to try Jalen Ramsey, he'll eventually throw an interception at him. So why not throw it to the other guy, who in this case, Darion Kendrick, who is the rookie. So I feel like that's a matchup that this Kyle Shanahan and Garoppolo will want to test early and maybe often. I would hope. The Rams have some solid safeties. Let's start off with Taylor Rapp. Last week he was targeted 8 times. He allowed 6 receptions in his coverage for 51 yards. Going back to last season, though, in Week 10, he was targeted 3 times, allowed 3 receptions for 65 yards. Week 18 was targeted 5 times, 4 receptions allowed for 27 yards. And he didn't play in the conference championship. So he's decent. I mean, it's not crazy yardage, but he gets the job done. I mean, Rams' other starting safety, Jordan Fuller, he was limited today. He has a hamstring injury. And he didn't practice yesterday, but he practiced today, Friday. So I think Jordan Fuller is probably on track to play. If you look at Fuller's stats from last season against the Niners, Week 10, he had 6 tackles, 3 missed tackles, 2 stops, and he allowed just 1 reception on 1 target for only 3 yards. And in Week 18, he was targeted once, allowed 1 reception for 13 yards. And he didn't play in the conference championship. But like I said, I think the Rams have some solid safeties. And so I think it'll be best for the 49ers to just want to test the intermediate levels of the field, the short intermediate, which is a preference of theirs anyway. So I expect they're going to do that. But altogether, looking at both the offense and the defense matchups, I know defense is going to do enough to keep the offense in the game. They always do at this point. I don't ever doubt the defense. Like, dating back to even last season and this season, they're arguably better. Just don't worry about them. No matter who they're playing, they can get it done. So the big question is, what does the offense do? Because I know the defense is going to do enough to keep the offense in the game, but is the offense going to score any points? That's the question. So it's simply a matter of the offense capitalizing on their opportunities and executing a hell of a lot better than last week all around. They have to. But especially Jimmy Garoppolo has to. He has to be better. He has to take care of the football, which is proven to be difficult for him. And this offense needs to get points on the board, like desperately. They need to get points, not just in the first quarter. They need to be consistent. They need to keep it going all game. They can't just step their foot on the gas in the first quarter. Kyle Shanahan has a great few, he starts the games off with a scripted play call, for the, first 25 plays or something like that. Can call a hell of a 25 first plays. Like, those scripted plays are awesome. They almost always score in those situations, but they need to be able to do it all game. All right. And it's not just the play calling. I know a lot of people have had Kyle Shanahan under fire this last week, as they're angry about some of the play calling. And some of that's fair. It's like we were talking about earlier, being more aggressive on first down and second down. He's not very aggressive, right? But it's not like the plays aren't there. Sometimes it's just about executing. Jimmy Garoppolo needs to be able to see those guys and hit those guys when they're open. And so Again, they need to just do that all game. And I think this is going to be a tough one, but it's a very important one, right? I mean, it's a divisional game with all the talk from the last week. The 49ers need to put something need to put together a performance that is going to shut up all the noise, because there was a hell of a lot of it this past week. And I think it's going to be a close game. But I think the 49ers can win it if they get their offense back up. The offense needs to have the defenses back. That's what they need to do in this game. So if my score prediction is contingent on the offense getting their shit together, and my prediction is 27-24 Niners. They got to do it. It's prime time. You're at home. You gotta put it together. All right. So that's what I think. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have any score predictions for this game? Do you guys have the 49ers winning? Let me know in the comments. But one last time before I get out of here, just want to say, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. If you liked this preview, I do these previews every week, one for the offense, one for the defense. Yeah, make sure you like this video as well. And I will talk to you guys Monday after the game for my instant reaction. Have a good weekend, guys. Peace.